Donald Trump has kept a lot of promises already. It's strange because with securing the border or writing these executive actions, I feel good. With his executive order on the biological differences in sexes, I feel good. Pardoning the J6ers was tremendous, and I feel great. But Donald Trump has kept his word and pardoned the founder of Silk Road, Ross Ulbricht, and this one is tremendously emotional for so many people, and it's kind of strange that this one hits us so hard. But if you know the story of Silk Road and how they went after this guy, it really does feel like the weaponization of government set examples to punish individuals. This guy basically went to prison for things other people did. He's now been pardoned, and Donald Trump issuing a statement said, to keep, essentially, thanks to the libertarian movement that supported him so strongly, he is keeping his word and issuing an unconditional pardon for Ross Ulbricht, not even a commutation. And I just want to say with that, this one mattered to a lot of people so much because of what the story represented, what it meant to Ross as an individual, his family. And Donald Trump is keeping his word to those that supported him. This is a massive story. I do feel it's a bit esoteric. The average person may not truly understand what this means or why it's so substantial, but this one really tugs at your heartstrings. Donald Trump keeping his word. Man, I feel like this might be the first real president, real leader in my lifetime. And so we have a lot to go over. We have a lot of tremendous guests. Before we get started, my friends, of course, the promos. Cast Brew Coffee. How much you want to bet Ian's got no coffee left? Ian's Graphene Dream. 612 bags remain. I don't know how this guy does it. He sold 5,350 bags in a month.
It's low acidity, but don't sell yourself short. You do a lot of the work.
Yeah, but I mean, none of the other coffees sell nearly as...
Get your low acidity coffee if you haven't had it yet. It's real easy on the stomach compared to the other stuff.
Phil has coffee as well, 2 weeks till Christmas. He's dressed like Santa. We actually don't have the stats on how much he sold, but I think he sold quite a bit, but Ian's goes like hotcakes. Also, check out boonieshq.com. I'd say pick up your 28th Amendment skateboard, the right to keep, bear, and breed chickens, but unfortunately, we're sold out. So thank you all for buying that. We still have the right, we're sold out of the right to arm bears as well. Okay, the boobies. There we go. The boobies is still available, the blue-footed booby bird. And I do believe we have Step on Sneck and Find Out in stock. If you haven't gotten your Step on Sneck and Find Out, you can grab that. Of course, as always, become a member at timcast.com. I've got to shout this one out, my friends. We have an amazing guest, Dominik Tarczynski, the best MP in Europe. And we had an amazing conversation before the show for our green room, members only. You are not going to want to miss this, talking about the Soviet era, what it was like in Poland, what Poland is going through now, why Poland has resisted the woke internationalist insanity. And we will talk a little bit about it tonight as well, but this was a really great episode, and I believe it's about 40 minutes or so. So become a member at timcast.com to watch that, and also get access to our Discord community, where you can hang out with over 20,000 different individuals, make friends. There's a massive library of content, early morning shows, pre-shows, after shows, etc. Don't forget to also smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. And joining us tonight, we have a massive panel of truly amazing guests. As I mentioned, European Member of Parliament, Dominik Tarczynski.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, good morning, whenever you are. Thank you for watching.
I guess with your title, people generally understand who you are, but do you have a brief introduction about what you do?
I'm a lawyer from Poland, serving for Polish member for Polish Parliament for 2 terms. Now elected to European Parliament, 2nd term. I'm doing my PhD in international law on genocide, especially cultural genocide. But my main thing now is the European Parliament and fighting for freedom. That's how I would describe it, to be honest.
And you were here to support Trump? Is that...
Well, first of all, to support him during the campaign, and now celebrate. We worked hard, and it's time to celebrate. But also, I'm very happy. I'm really thank you for having me. I'm just wondering how he's gonna deliver, because we worked hard. We fought for whatever happened, for the victory actually, and now it's time to pray to support him. We have to pray. I'm serious about it, because it's not gonna be easy.
Yeah.
He promised a lot, and what they left is a lot.
Right on. Well, I'm glad to have you. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we of course have the best member of American Congress. We have Rep. Thomas Massie.
The American Parliament, if you will, Dominik.
One day.
Yes, one day. You gotta, we pretend there's only two parties
Right.
in our country, but we
It's
shoehorn,
not.
we shoehorn at least 6 different parties into
Right.
those two parties. And I'm kind of some days a party unto myself within the Republican Party. I feel like I tell people I'm not bipartisan. Bi means you like both.
Right.
Trans, I'm transpartisan.
You better be careful nowadays.
People call me trans because I'm transpartisan.
I know what it be.
I don't know which cloakroom to go into some days.
I think there's an executive order against that.
At least political.
Introducing himself then as Connor Tomlinson.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm back. I'm paying homage to the Ascendant Emperor visiting the Capitol. Everyone's open carrying Trump paraphernalia now. It's fantastic to
The
see.
MAGA hats are everywhere.
I know. I've spoken to at least 3 foreign Uber drivers that have said he's going to do no more wars and deport all illegals, and it's great. So I'm just hoping it cross-pollinates over to the woke North Korea that the UK has become. I feel like Solzhenitsyn visiting the US here.
Wow. So who are you? What do you do?
I am a writer for Ian Hirsi-Ali's Courage Media. I host Tomlinson Talks over at lotuseaters.com. I host Deprogrammed at the New Culture Forum. General internet troublemaker these days.
Right on. Josie, the redheaded libertarian, is here.
Hi, I'm Josie. I'm the redheaded libertarian. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm Josie. I'm the redheaded libertarian. I host a show on X called Spaces with Josie, where I interview the coolest people on the planet. And I also have a channel on YouTube called 1776 X Josie, where I educate people on revolutionary history because their teachers failed to do so.
And then, of course, because as a condition of Rep. Massie's appearance, he insisted this man be here.
That's true. Thanks, Tom. You made it happen. Hey, Ian Crossland, I'm happy to be here. Reoccurring co-host of Timcast IRL. I've been making internet videos since 2006. I care deeply about communication, being real and being honest and listening. That was something I learned early on. It's how important it is to listen. So I'm going to be doing that for the next hour. Then Phil Labonte, the one and only, will be stepping in for me. So let's get rolling, Tim.
Here's the big story. And I'm glad that we have this great panel who can really break this down. From the Hill, Trump pardons Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht. President Trump said Tuesday he had signed a full pardon for Ross Ulbricht, the founder of the scandalous online marketplace Silk Road, fulfilling a campaign promise Trump had made to libertarian voters. I do believe I have the official statement here in a tweet from Thomas Massie, in fact. Trump said, "I just called the mother of Ross William Ulbricht to let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement which supported me so strongly, it was my pleasure to have just signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics who were involved in the modern day weaponization of government against me. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Ridiculous." First off, for Donald Trump to keep his word on not just this, but so many other things. I saw so many J6ers the other day who had smiles on their faces. These were insane and unjust persecutions. And now with the pardoning of Ross Ulbricht, it is an honor to have Donald Trump be serving as our president and keeping his word. But Rep. Massie, I know, can you break down why this case is so important, why it was so insane, and why this matters?
Well, I don't think this matters, but there is a typo in Trump's tweet there that it's supposed to be Ulbricht. But I hope he still gets the pardon.
Right.
Oh, no.
But no, when I think about this, I'm thinking of a phrase in my head: make libertarians relevant again. And a lot of times the only way libertarians are relevant in elections is to be the spoiler in a close race. Maybe they take some of the votes away, like the Green Party might do to Democrats. But in this case, Angela McArdle, the chair of the Libertarian Party, decided to reach out, invited Trump to the Libertarian National Convention, where he spoke and he made this pledge that he would free Ross Ulbricht. So I think that's a big deal. That contributed to this. I decided 2 weeks before the election to endorse Trump myself. And I called him up and he answered the phone. We talked a little bit and I said, well, what should my endorsement say? And he brought up Ross.
Wow.
To me. And so he said, you could put that in your endorsement. And I thought, well, that would be a good way to lock this in.
Yeah.
So I did. I put it in my endorsement. In the middle of my endorsement is a sentence that says, the president has committed to freeing Ross Ulbricht. And then President Trump retweeted my endorsement. It was it's not legally binding, but it really, I think, made it more solid. And I was, just based on my personal conversation with President Trump, I was certain he was going to keep his word on this. And to me, this is a litmus test, really. Are you going to convert those campaign promises into reality? Because once you get elected, it's hard to hold
Right.
people accountable. Right.
I was worried. I mean, it has been over 24 hours. He was even getting some flack from Fox News for not having done it sooner, but he did. He's kept his word on so many things.
Well, and I want to share with you a letter that Ross wrote me on December 14th of this year. And his mom, Lynn, gave this to me. And I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this because it's personal, but it brought a tear to my eye. Mr. Massie, Inauguration Day fast approaches, and my hopes are running high that our new president will quickly put an end to my incarceration once he is sworn in. As I await the beginning of my new life in freedom, I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for your part in bringing about this wonderful outcome. You have consistently been a powerful voice in the public sphere, supporting my campaign for freedom, so my imminent release is as much a victory for you as it is for me and my family. Thank you for every single time you supported me, both publicly and in private. You put your faith and confidence in me, and now that I'm getting my second chance, I promise to make you proud that you did. I would love to connect with you once I am on the other side of these walls to see how I can help further the cause of freedom. So he's already thinking about what he can do. I know Josie's crying. I cried when I read this. I've read it twice, practiced it without. This is the first time I've been able to read it without crying. Because this is, like you were saying, Tim, this is a personal example of how an election matters, down to somebody who was going to rot in prison, was rotting in prison. And by the way, Ross, he didn't even, he was willing to settle for less than what Trump gave him. He was willing to settle to have a sentence commuted, which means you're basically guilty, an admission of guilt, but your sentence is over. You've served enough time. And it was a ridiculous over-sentencing, regardless of the guilt or not. I think it's a violation of the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment to our Constitution says no cruel or unusual punishment. Why should you get 2 life sentences plus 40 years?
Well, explain what was he accused of doing?
Running a website that allowed people to buy and sell drugs, for instance, using Bitcoin. I think they made an example out of him because they didn't want people using Bitcoin. And now it's far more mainstream, but I think that's one of the reasons they did it.
But I think we should clarify, I guess. The website allowed people to buy and trade. What people did with it after the fact was what the people did with it.
Well, MasterCard lets you pay for prostitutes, right? You can't and obviously he was trying to enable a broader set of trade, but I think it was ridiculous over sentencing. And here's another example why it was. Everybody who committed a crime using that website is already free.
Yeah, lesser sentences.
Lesser sentences than him running the website. So this was an attack on freedom of speech, really, to some degree, being able to run this website, but also on Bitcoin and alternate currencies. And Ross was the scapegoat. He was the example. They wanted to make an example. By the way, the people who, Trump alludes to the morals or moral depravity of the people who convicted Ross. The FBI investigators or whatever, some of those were convicted themselves of lying and
Wow.
setting up evidence. And they're already out as well, but they were the ones who were, trying to set Ross up in some of these things. And then there was a public smear campaign against Ross that scared a lot of people away, a lot of congressmen, from trying to take up his cause because, oh my gosh, Ross did that. Oh, he tried to order a hit on somebody. Like that was one of the claims that was made. Never prosecuted, never brought up in court. I guarantee you if they had any evidence of that, they would have used it to convict him for another life sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously they were throwing the book at him, but because they had those stories out there circulating that Ross tried to order a hit on somebody, for instance, that scared people away from taking up Ross's cause. Now, there was a letter circulated among Congress that got, a few dozen signatures, were some people who weren't scared of it. But it's just a great win. I know Dominik's celebrating the victory, and this is one of the realizations of that victory.
Right.
I'm just super,
freedom, physical freedom, but also our brains, our mentality is freed now. I'm serious about it because we had this conversation before the show, and I had this experience with this driver, Uber driver, who told me, he said, okay, now I'm going to fight with all these leftist teachers who try to deprive and, do these things to my daughter. And I was thinking, where were you for 4 years? He was scared. Now we are freed. Now we can experience what the life is. We can fight for what we believe in. So this victory, it's not about President Trump only. It's about us, obviously, about nations, about not only American nation. It's about freedom in general around the world. Because as we see ourselves as a Western civilization, as the free democratic countries, we see the differences between North Korea, Venezuela, and others. Russia, we are free. We are fully free. So what this victory does to the people around the world is opens, let you breathe. Now you can say whatever you think, especially you can say that there are two genders, women and men. You can say obvious facts. There's many people who thinks that the earth is flat. They're free. They can think whatever they want. I'm not going to discuss this, but you can say whatever you want now. And this Uber driver is one of the examples from the recent days, hours, I would say, when I spot the difference. Like people, thank God now. So what happened this last 4 years? What they've done to the nations, because it's applicable to Europe as well. What they did was, I cannot say that this child, this little kid who thinks that is a cat or dog, should be educated that you are not a dog, because someone would be offended. Mm-hmm. Our civilization went to the level where everyone was scared to name and call the obvious facts. Now we can go back to normality. That's why Donald Trump said that we are not Republicans. Well, he didn't say that, but what he meant is our party is the party of the common sense. It wasn't about Republicans and Democrats in general. In my opinion, it was about common sense, right? Women and men. That was very, very obvious. Security, safety. That was my discussion when I was on election night on one of the shows, and one of the leftists asked me, who the hell is this guy? During the debate, what are you doing in here? Why do you care about U.S.? Why are you chanting U.S.? You're not U.S. citizen. How come you're here? And my answer was, I was invited to U.S. and I came here with my passport. All right. So migration was the huge problem. It is a global problem, right? Europe has this problem for years. U.S. had this problem for years, only because of leftism, the ideology. The other thing is climate. People went mad. They found a new god. Climate. We're going to cherish. We had this conversation about the women who doesn't want to have children.
Yeah.
They want depopulate our planet because the planet is on the flame. It's burning. We have to save the planet. So let's, abort babies or not have babies because we have to save a planet.
But for you in Europe, you were saying this to me earlier that what happens here 6 months later,
that's correct,
happens in Europe. So a Trump victory here. Actually, I think we saw Brexit happened and then Trump won the first time.
They had enough. They just had enough. And they were criticized, like Great Britain, England was criticized for leaving EU, and obviously Nigel was called Russian asset, and this weakening of European Union is in favor of Russia, and all this crap. They did not consider this decision as a fruit, an effect of leftism within the European Union, totalitarian way of behaving. And when I was asked, why do you care about America? Why do you spend so much time in America? Why do you fight for Trump? Why do you spend time with Americans? They don't elect you. They don't vote for you. That was the actual question I was asked. And I said, because I care about my family. I care about my homeland. Because whatever happens in America, it happens in Europe. If America is weak, Europe is weak. If Europe is weak, Poland is under threat between Russia and Germany.
What do you think, Connor?
I love how people go, why do you care so much about American politics? Oh, by the way, NATO, can you bail us out of this?
That's
tight
right.
spot real
That's
quick?
right.
As far as the Ross Ulbricht story, I do find it very curious how Meta, as a platform, was found by the Wall Street Journal in 2023 to be facilitating child trafficking, and knowing that they were doing it because they were putting up warnings saying, hey, this post might redirect you to a dodgy site that might be selling children. Are you sure you want to click on it? Rather than taking action. Or a story that I broke in late 2023 for GB News as well. Instagram was being used by people trafficking organizations, mainly in North Africa, to market their services to asylum seekers, illegal migrants, to break into Britain via the English Channel. And alongside these videos of young men using their services were images and videos of young women in various states of wearing short skirts and having too much to drink out on a night out in the UK. And they were essentially advertising young English women as the spoils of war for illegal migrants to come over and claim. Again, Instagram, alerted to this, did nothing. So why are they not prosecuted with the same standard of facilitating illegal activity as Ross Ulbricht was? Very curious that. I wonder if it's just lobbying efforts or the fact that certain politicians could trade on narrative control.
Right.
Let me speak to an example of that. So somebody created a profile being a fake Thomas Massie congressman and was contacting widows and trying to get their retirement money. And
That happens all the time.
yeah.
Wow.
And so I call up Facebook and they act like they can't stop it. And they said, well, we don't know. We can't see it. I said, they're using the same picture as me. You've got some image search thing. You can go find this. They acted like they couldn't. They said, go call the old lady that lost her money and tell her to pull up her computer screen and give us the exact URL. I'm like, if she knew the URL, she wouldn't have been defrauded of the money. And we got it taken down. And then another one came back up. Whenever they come back up after you get them taken down, you know they're making money or they wouldn't go to the effort. But they tried to pretend that they had no technology to stop this from happening. And I know it was a lie.
I want to jump to this story from the Post-Millennial. DC jail holding out on releasing J6ers after Trump issues pardons. Quote, of course, DC Gulag is holding out because it's what they do. Kelly told Bannon that in the wake of the pardons issued by Trump, J6ers are gradually being released from federal prisons across the country. Of course, DC Gulag is holding out because that's what they do, because this is a political gulag. So they're going to do whatever they can to extend the torment of Trump supporters in custody there. We've heard a bunch of stories of there were some individuals that were being processed for release, stopped, turned around, and brought back to their cells. And I'm curious if you understand why it's happening, or if anybody's familiar. What are the excuses they're giving, or should these people just be released?
It's the language. So the language says he needed pardons for everybody who's been, what did he say, charged or convicted?
Yep.
Convicted. But then after that, it was like the rest of them that hadn't gotten that far, it needed to be approved by the DOJ, and that wasn't going to happen till the next morning. So I don't know if this...
And some of them are on the probation, so...
Yes. So I don't know if this got corrected today or if this is still accurate. It was the language. They were
I had a meeting.
using semantics on the language in order to...
There's another individual who was initially arrested over J6, but then they found a grenade or something to that effect. Are you familiar with this story?
Did they really, though?
Did they really, though? Either way, because the charges are not specifically J6, there are some people who were clearly arrested over this who have not yet been released.
I think he said what?
Against the order.
Yeah.
I mean, those who are not released, because I had a meeting with the guys who just left this morning. They had a first breakfast, yeah. And they are on the probation. There are different conditions, but the stories are horrific. What they went through, physical state, mental state, some of them on the crutches, as you could see, yeah. So physically, they are devastated. And that was, I mean, I think someone should do documenting their stories and testimonies as soon as possible. Because for us, they are, J6ers, right? That's it, J6ers. But when you hear the personal story, what they went through all these years, all this time, I would call it torture. When, as a lawyer, from what I heard, they went through torture, which is against international law. Those responsible should pay consequences for what they have done.
What's some of the horrible, like what was like the most horrible?
I don't want to say that, but it was physically really bad. Really bad.
Outside of the more extreme stories, there are simple ones like people being put in extended solitary confinement and not given proper meals or exercise.
And that's by the international law, that's the part of the torture. Because everyone thinks that torture is when you lose your nails, thief, or whatever. No, when you are not getting food, water, when you are not taking care as the one who should, the way you should be by the law, that's the part of the torture. So you don't have to be in Guantanamo to go through torture. It's completely different by the international law. It's very serious.
I have a breaking news. U.S. trades Taliban prisoner for American detainees Ryan Corbett and William Wallace McKenty. So
Trump's just getting a lot done real fast, huh?
Yeah. You ask me how what I think what it's going to happen, and I said he has to provide. He already he says day one, and he meant it. Like 200 orders, executive orders, day one. What he did now on day one is much more than Democrats did. Oh, sorry, it's not more. Wrong. Let me say again. They did so much damage, and he in one day made so much good that these three things: gender equality, which means two genders, then pardoning people who went through torture, who only wanted to experience their own freedom. Now, illegal migrants, like starting with deportation. Thank God, that's the third thing. And what was the most important thing during this debate? What we had to discuss through all these months and years, I would say. Illegal migrants, J6ers, and energy, right? Yeah. What he did, one of the first executive orders was get rid of this Paris Agreement. Bravo, Mr. President. I'd love to do the same. If I would be president, I would do it the same day one.
I like the way that he was doing it too, because there's a video, and if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It was transparent. He sat down at his desk with a bunch of reporters, signing executive order, talking to the reporters as he's like chilling out. Like we missed this for 4 years. We didn't have a president that talked to
then
people.
He asked them how many press conferences Biden did like this, and they went 0. I loved 0.
Rep Massie, I mean, you're more libertarian. How do you feel about these executive orders?
Well, I was in the rotunda. You know, they had to move the inauguration inside, so I was in there and had a fairly good seat. And when you're sitting there, you have to decide where you're going to stand up and clap for. And I'm not one of these people that looks and sees as everybody else standing up. If he says something, reinstating the members of the military who were thrown out because of the vaccine mandate. That was a big one for me. Another one is stop fighting wars that aren't ours. Get back to focusing on America. And I think he's already starting to deliver on that in the Middle East. With negotiating, he's got somebody over there who's negotiating the day before he was sworn in the release of some of the hostages in Gaza, but I think more importantly, an end to that war. And so I think that's the other promise. I remember a phone call I had with Trump when he was president, number 45, and we had this controversial vote on Iran. He wasn't really in agreement with the way I was going to vote. And I respect his opinion. And basically, the issue was this: they had taken out Soleimani in Iraq, not in Iran. And the question was, could he strike mainland Iran? And the Democrats were not sincere in their effort, but they put a piece of legislation on the floor that says you can't go to war with Iran without a vote of Congress. Well, that's just patently obvious to me. But there were only 3 Republicans that voted for that. You know, all the Democrats voted for it. They were just trying to embarrass Trump.
That's in the Constitution that you can't go to war without a vote from Congress.
So the president called me. He got caught wind that I was going to be voting for that resolution, and I thanked him. You know, I tried to diffuse the situation a little bit. I just said, "Look, you're the first president since I've been old enough to vote who hasn't started a war, and I really appreciate that." And he was thankful that I acknowledged it, but I said, I just can't be with you on this vote today. I don't care if it's Obama who's president or you're president, it's Congress's role to declare war or not. And his argument to me was, if you give me more authority or don't tie my hands, I can basically carry a bigger stick and keep us out of war. And my argument back was, well, if we allow you to make a bigger, I wouldn't say bluff because it could eventually turn into something. If we allow you to make a bigger threat, but we give up in that our ability to stop it, then if they call your threat, we're in full-blown war, and we've already given up our ability as Congress to say we can't be in that war. And so I ultimately I didn't have his favor that day, because I did vote unfortunately, I did vote for a resolution the Democrats put on the floor, but it was one that says you can't go to war without an act of Congress.
This is like since the Patriot Act, they've been like George Bush was declaring, hey,
No,
Afghanistan.
Since World War II, I believe, was the last
Yes.
time
That
we
was the
declared
last
war.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Vietnam was just a peacekeeping action.
But
on
under
paper.
AUMF, it all got sketchy about how much power the president actually has to declare war, but there's been about 80 conflicts that have been war related that have not been voted on by Congress, because the last one was one of the battles of World War II.
Yeah, and just to wrap this up, what I want to do is give President Trump praise for putting this in his inauguration speech, to say we're not going to fight wars that aren't ours, and we're going to focus back on our own borders.
Well, so how do you feel? I mean, it's a lot of executive orders, though.
Oh, yeah.
Is there concern
200.
about?
Yeah. About 200.
About
Most-
200.
About 200, right? Yeah.
But most of them are undoing things that Biden did, where Biden overstepped his authority.
One he did was he claimed that the cartels in Mexico are foreign terrorist organizations, which gives him
Because they
kind
are.
of
Yeah, they are.
the legal authority to declare drone bombs now in Mexico, and he wants to build up the troop presence on the southern border. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying he did that. And what do you guys think about that?
We had this discussion just before the show about the new way of gaining power through war, a new way of new weapons, basically. Because my PhD is on genocide, but especially on cultural genocide. So drugs, alcohol is used as a weapon against the nations. Like I know from Venezuela, in the past they said, okay, we're not going to use tanks against U.S. We're going to use drugs. So what is happening is not only business; it's a political decision. Fentanyl is one of those recent decisions, political decision to pump it into America and kill society, weaken the society. And I don't believe I know it's not only business. This is the way to kill. That's why I think it's a part of culture genocide against American society. This is what they're trying to do in Europe. But Poland, for example, is the last stronghold of normality and awareness that this is not only business. So we fight very hard and we protect our borders the way nobody does, because our parliament passed the law that we can use live bullets, lethal weapon to kill if you are trying to cross the border and harm any of our soldiers. So if you want to come to Poland illegally, trying to harm any of our services, you will die.
I wonder.
You will die.
Real quick, the United States has been largely funding all these other countries, wars in other countries, and correct me if I'm wrong. Has this been fact checked yet that Trump paused foreign aid for 90 days?
For everyone but Israel.
Really?
Yes, that's what the community note said.
Wow. Well, either way, it's a start, I guess. But in terms of how much we've spent on Israel and Ukraine and Afghanistan, Iraq, etc.,
Taiwan recently.
The only actual move that would ever make sense to an American is securing our southern border, dealing with the cartels that are trafficking fentanyl, drugs, children. When they come to us and say Ukraine and Russia, it's like, okay, I mean, this is 8,000 more, 12,000 miles away. How far away is it from here? What is the purpose of American resources going into these conflicts? Israel, for instance. And on the southern border, we have drugs, trafficking, murder, death. They say that, I forgot the name of the city, Juarez. Yeah. One of the most dangerous cities in the world. It's on our border and there's death and explosions and guns. I mean, we should stop that, right?
Why soldiers and border officers are given guns? What is the reason?
In the United States.
What is the purpose of having a gun?
Deterrence.
To use it.
All
What
about
is the
deterrence.
problem? What is the problem for American Congress to pass the law that immediately when someone is trying to cross the wall is dead? What's the problem? We passed this law. Do it. I mean,
Well, so
what is the
let's
problem?
contrast the
with the
Polish-
experience of the gangs, because it's not about killing people, innocent people, for no reason, like like a dog, like ducks. It's not about that. We are human beings. We know that there are different situations, but the wave of illegals are used by the terrorists in Europe. They blow themselves in Paris, in Sweden, in Germany, not in Poland. Zero illegal migration equals zero terrorist attack. That's
But
official data.
I want to ask the congressman your perspective as an American on how we would handle the southern border security issue.
Well, I mean, even if you didn't need guns or did need guns, Biden didn't care.
Yeah,
We were
true.
welcoming
It's
them
not,
in
it's not
with
about
the
you.
policies.
It's about Democrats. What they did. They did nothing.
It's not that we
They-
can't stop them. I mean, he can build a wall
Yeah,
and
of
stop them.
course.
The Democrats opened the doors in the wall.
Yeah, and
when-
invited them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
invite them when
Yeah.
they come in.
When
But
we were-
Invite them.
just one other thing about being in the rotunda when Trump was delivering that speech. From where I was sitting, I could see George Bush and I could see Bill Clinton and I could see Joe Biden. Just a cabal of neocons who have started wars and got us involved in so many things overseas. And it looked like they were eating lemons, and Trump was having a ball with it,
Eating lemons.
just feeding them lemons.
That was wonderful. I wanted to answer Ian's question that he asked earlier. So Donald Trump did use his emergency powers to. Donald Trump, is that good? Good.
that's-
All right.
that's
Donald
better.
Trump did use his emergency powers to declare an invasion. And that tends to still need Congress to issue some sort of joint resolution or kind of back him up. It needs congressional affirmation, I believe. He can't just do that, but he did that so that way he could enact the Alien Enemies Act that John Adams incited in 1798, and that would give him the power to order troops to restrain and just apprehend illegal people that are threatening America. And the last time this was used was World War II when they did it to the Japanese. So he's not planning to put them all in camps like FDR did. He's planning to send them back home.
So
I think about, like-
just a couple of clarifications. Donald Trump issued a lethal force authorization back in 2018, and it is the current policy of CBP that they do have the authorization for lethal force
Thank God.
when presented with a threat or something of that nature.
So that
President
wasn't
Trump, I
overturned
salute
by
you.
Biden. That
Was it?
Biden didn't overturn. I know he went in and overturned everything.
Well, so the issue was when we had this big border crisis with Texas and the federal government, I believe it was reaffirmed, or it was explicitly affirmed, the National Guard had the authority to use lethal force because there are cartel members with rifles
That's right.
with ill-intent trafficking children.
But you had 4 years of services being scared to use it. That is the problem. Because if this law is in power, why they are still coming? Why they are not afraid? When we passed the law recently, the numbers of illegal drop drastically. Like
Well,
that.
the issue is largely that although Trump issued, I mean, I'll clarify.
So I
this,
think
just-
Democrats, they build the atmosphere for the illegals with these apps, websites, inviting them, and services did not what to do. Okay, we do have a right, but then on the political side, we have president and an administration which is inviting. That's how I understand
So-
this situation.
I'll break this down because it's worse than you than we are discussing. The first thing I'll say is the authorization, as we see it, is it's supposed to be obvious. If our law enforcement, if our National Guard, if our soldiers, our federal agents are being threatened by obvious armed cartel members or otherwise, they have a right to use force to defend themselves and this country. What ends up happening under the Biden administration is this open door policy that they deny until it becomes so problematic they have no choice. Chicago is dealing with a mass
Right.
migration problem. It's worse. We've discussed it on the show. Dr. Phil appearing on The View explaining it was so far gone as to how Biden, his administration, was allowing this, that there were CBP agents publicly stating that there were children being trafficked into prostitution under their watch and facilitated by CBP. Customs and Border Protection were bringing in children with numbers on their arms that they knew they were being sent into child prostitution, and they assisted in it as per the orders they were given by the
Right.
federal government. What's changing now? It's really simple. We don't need to worry about lethal force. We don't need to worry. Donald Trump is shutting the border down for illegal immigration, and he's gonna build a wall. He's issuing the executive orders. So back to what you were saying, Ian. When I look at issues of Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, etc., you're gonna have to give me a really, really clever and likely circuitous argument about the interests of the American people and what these things do for us. The southern border makes sense when we know from Dr. Phil himself, children are being trafficked.
Yeah,
But I believe, did you want to add to that?
No, I'll wait for Ian.
I kind of joked at the Iowa caucus. We had Vivek Ramaswamy on about setting up machine gun nests all along the southern border. Like I'm kind of hardcore about this.
Yeah, everybody got freaked out by that.
And it was like, well, I put the seed in the ground, and I'm not. What concerns me is these cartels sit back in their headquarters, and they get citizens that don't know what's going on to run drugs in their underwear across the border, and then what do they open fire on?
No.
Okay.
So like, how do you discern a threat?
Okay,
when it's
so
hidden.
When they're attacking us, when they're putting bombs in Juarez and things like that, we know, like when they are murdering people, it is reasonable to say we have to defend people from being murdered. That's self-defense.
Okay, if I may.
500,000 children went missing.
That's right.
The HHS is in charge of placing the unaccompanied minors. So it might go to show that the U.S. government is the leading child trafficking organization in the United States.
I do want to jump to the next story though, because
One sentence.
yeah. Well,
What do you do? What do you do when someone is trying to break into your home, to your house? What do you
Depends
do?
on the state in this country.
Okay,
Well,
no. What I'm talking about logical thinking. Do you ask question or do you shoot and then ask question?
But-
I shoot and then I ask questions. What do you do if there is 3 people in the house? What do you do when it's 5 people in your house? What would you do if there's 330 million? America is your home. You have to protect it. Shoot and then ask questions.
Well, the issue here in the United States is that each different state has different laws. So for Poland,
No, I'm talking about the law in European Union. I'm not talking about someone being killed for nothing. I'm talking about the act of terrorism. I'm talking about those who are trying to commit crime. I'm not talking about shooting to anyone just to be, I'm talking about the terrorists, gangs, those who are trying to sell drugs and they're killing people. You have to protect yourself in general.
So obviously Trump is doing everything he can that he can do by executive action and executive orders and policy changes. And a lot of that is rolling back to what he had when he was president the first time, which worked. But there's another prong here. As a member of U.S. Congress, I have to tell you, we are also going to pass laws. And there's a bill called reconciliation that allows you to do this with 51 votes in the Senate instead of the typical 60 votes. And so this will be one of the first bills that comes through Congress. There's going to be a tendency to add a lot of other stuff to it and not do things that need to be done in it. But I want to assure Ian, I have the same concerns. Like we don't have a king here. And, he doesn't get to make law, but he gets to enforce law, and there are some policies. But we are going to have bills to do basically a belt and suspenders here. So one of Trump's executive orders is to end birthright citizenship, for instance. We can do that in law as well. Now, there'll be arguments, constitutional arguments made to the Supreme Court, and a lot of this will get tied up, but it's a more solid footing when it's a law that's passed by Congress as opposed to an executive action or executive order. So that's going to come in the first 6 months of this Congress.
let's jump to this story from the Post-Millennial. You're fired. Trump admin removes over 1,000 Biden-appointed staffers not aligned with MAGA. My presidential personnel office is actively in the process of identifying and removing over 1,000 presidential appointees from the previous administration. Trump had posted this on a Truth Social saying, our first day in the White House is not over yet. My presidential personnel office is actively in the process of identifying and removing over 1,000 presidential appointees from the previous administration who are not aligned with our vision to make America great again. Let this serve as official notice of dismissal for these 4 individuals, with many more coming soon. He then goes on to mention Jose Andres from the President's Council on Sports, Mark Milley from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, Brian Hook from the Wilson Center for Scholars, and Keisha Lance Bottoms from the President's Export Council. We also have this story from the Daily Mail. Donald Trump fires first female Coast Guard leader over her obsession with DEI. So going back to what Trump is famous for, he has firing lots of people, good thing.
May I defend the absolute necessity of this with an example from my own country? So those who peripherally follow British politics over in the UK might know a woman by the name of Liz Truss. She was the shortest serving Prime Minister in history and has since become a decent friend of mine because the layman's view is that she crashed the economy with a new budget. What ended up happening was the banks, reacting to what the Federal Reserve were doing to curb Biden's inflation, set interest rates high about a week before. And then they decided to treat pension products the same way as they did running up to the 2008 crash. It led to a run on the market. She was scapegoated for it. She was kicked out. Nobody at the banks lost their jobs for losing millions in public funds because what the Tony Blair government did in 1997 up to 2010 was ensure that every single civil service appointee is appointed by another civil servant and every institution is neutral and independent from Parliament. So the heads of the banks, the heads of the civil service, no matter what they get wrong, they cannot be fired or replaced by someone in Parliament, and they have the power to, as we've seen, create enough pressure, enough turmoil to unseat an elected Prime Minister. And the reason I raise that is because the chairman of the Fed, Jerome Powell, as soon as the prospect of tariffs were brought up, he was saying, well, we might be able to do something with interest rates about that. This is something J.D. Vance warned about. This is something that Trump himself said that he was on the watch for. So the need to have everyone in these institutions that are ostensibly neutral but riddled with political ideology on side to enact the democratic will of the people is necessary, and so Trump needs to get rid of these people.
You know, talk about oligarchy. It's been coming up a lot lately. Someone said Trump was involved with an oligarchy. I mean, Federal Reserve, that's the oligarchy right there. Is these unelected, quasi-public, private organizations, dudes come in and they can like choose where the global interest is. It's absolutely ridiculous.
He has to be able to fire anybody, really. Otherwise, elections don't matter, and we don't. The Democrats like to call it a democracy, but I call it a republic. Neither of those is the case if you have people who can't be fired after an election by their boss. So this is just a principle that has to exist. Now, the one thing he's done in an executive order is just a hiring freeze. Okay, you're going to have people who quit, or maybe just they've served so long in government, they die, whatever. At least take advantage of the fact everybody can't stay around forever and quit hiring people.
If they supported the past
that.
administration politically for what they have done to this country and then to the world in many ways, they should quit and they should be fired. That's it.
The word democracy is mentioned 0 times in the U.S. Constitution. The words a Republican form of government is mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. So referring to America as a democracy is anti-American.
In some ways.
Yeah.
But the Democrats have cognitive dissonance when they try to argue that our country should be run by bureaucrats who can't be fired and then say they're trying to preserve the democracy.
No, that makes perfect sense. It actually makes perfect sense. I'll explain it. They believe everyone's a blank slate. So they think that actually everyone has identical interests deep down, and instead someone like Donald Trump is coming along with his populist, racist rhetoric and casting kind of spell over them. Now, because they're enlightened to this, and all of their experts understand this, they can act in your self-interest to realize your latent potential as a egalitarian blank slate person and enact progressive policies that are actually what you want deep down if you weren't just tricked by misinformation. That is what these people believe.
Now I understand.
It is. And they use the democracy line, as we've known, we've pointed out for some time. When they say our democracy, they were referring to their bureaucratic establishment government, not the will of the people, or the republic, or a nation of independent states. It is just whatever, at the time, the hive mind seems to agree with. That's where they march in lockstep.
They call it the Democratic Party. This is things you can call your party anything you want, like the We Kick Dogs Party, and not ever kick a dog. But your party can still be called Democratic when it's oligarchic in nature.
Well, they pass bills.
Rep Massie, how many times have you encountered a bill that's titled something like the Free Pancakes for Breakfast Bill, and then you read it and it says,
I love puppies bill.
It makes dogs illegal.
The Freedom Act, the Patriot Act.
Exactly.
Inflation Reduction Act is the most recent famous one. Yeah.
This is why landslide victory was so important, to prove that there's no discussion. Because what we heard from Kamala, our democracy is in danger, under threat. Trump is coming. Like, he would be someone who wants to steal the will of the nation. And then this nation under threat, this nation which was scared, gave the voice and voted. And
Yeah.
this victory was, I don't know, who won with such a big numbers. I mean, I was in shock. I knew he's going to win, and I was hoping that he's going to win, but the outcome was great.
Was this the most votes ever received?
Probably, yes.
It was?
So, number-wise. So there is no discussion about democracy, which is under fire. And this, I know this very well because democracy, rule of law, and all this sentences, beautiful words are in European Union when the leftists are targeting Republicans, conservatives. You are the threat against democracy. Do you remember the referendum? That was Scotland, I believe. The outcome was not very good, so let's repeat it.
Yes. Well, the same with Brexit. The Brexit
let's
referendum
repeat it, because
was
they don't
litigated
like
for 4
it.
years. Well, and then
Wait,
what happened
real
with-
quick correction. Trump has 77.3 million to
That's what I was
Joe
thinking.
Biden's 81 million.
And obviously,
but-
Joe Biden won more black voters than Obama in Detroit, which is
Yeah,
completely...
but look at
Well,
Trump.
I mean, he was the most popular president of all time.
Yes.
And I want to clarify this too for everybody who's scoffing and laughing. You can say whatever you want. And I know everyone's saying he didn't actually get those votes. I'm going to say it like this, perhaps. Or a man who won with the most votes in U.S. history ever screwed up so miserably he was removed by his own party. Donald Trump debated this man and won the election in that moment and sent them into disarray. So if they want to claim their 81 million, talk about standing tall and falling hard.
Well, Seoul Cemeteries just stayed at home this time, I assume. I wanted to mention the Brexit thing because this is... The idea that democracy mattered to the people that wanted to relitigate Brexit is absurd because as soon as Brexit then happened, the British people were punished for voting for that. Brexit did precede Trump, but Brexit has never been properly carried out because the main reason that people voted for Brexit was the main reason they voted for Trump this time, and that was to lower inward migration. For people that don't know, America has net migration of about 1 million a year, right? You're a massive country. Still quite high. We're a country the size of New York State. And since Brexit, net migration has gone from about 300,000 a year to over 1 million every single year in the UK.
That's right.
And the composition has mainly not been chaps like Dominik, where it's majority 80% European, particularly Poles. It's now 250,000 Indians, 100,000 Nigerians, 100,000 Pakistanis, which is great for the grooming gangs, as you can imagine. And literally no party, other than Reform at the last election, but their immigration policy is a bit shaky, wants to stop it and address it. So democracy has not been delivered.
So that's very interesting because I used to live in London. I paid my taxes. I was a migrant, a legal migrant who contributed to your country for the opportunity which was given to me, a migrant, as a student, to learn a little bit of the English. And then I paid my taxes. I graduated with my university and I came back to my homeland. And I'm grateful to your country for this opportunity to learn a little bit of English, to be on Temple Podcast years after that. I paid my taxes. I have beautiful memories, and now I'm serving to my country. That is the right way to understand migration. If you want to come legally for 6 or 10 months, pay your taxes, and go back to your homeland. We are not North Korea. It's not like you cannot come to Poland or you cannot leave the country. What we want, what you should want, what actually you do want, is regular migration. You can apply, you can submit your documents, you can ask for a permission for a visa, you can stay for some time and then go back to your homeland if you are a real patriot. We do not want people who doesn't love their own country because definitely they will not love your country.
Do you know how many of that 1 million every year are taxpayers? Do you want to take a guess at the percentage?
I would say 10%.
5.
There you go.
5%.
There
So
you go.
all the debate about the H-1B visas and that in the US is absolutely fascinating. The UK is an absolute warning sign for you guys because in large enough quantities, you get net detriments, crime goes up, and it means that your home is no longer a home. It's just a revolving
Change your
door for
government.
economic opportunity.
That's it.
Let's jump to this story. We have this from Timcast News on X. Donald Trump came out in support of H-1B. I want to play for you the statement. It's not gotten a lot of attention. I'm surprised. I'm not seeing articles written about it. We did post it on Timcast News. Donald Trump says H-1B should bring in waiters and wine connoisseurs. So this is huge because there's a big debate at the end of December. Let me play the clip for you.
There's been some debate within your orbit over whether or not to keep or eliminate H-1B visas. What's your position on that? Do you want to keep H-1Bs or do you want to get rid of them?
I like both sides of the argument, but I also like very competent people coming into our country, even if that involves them training and helping other people that may not have the qualifications they do. But I don't want to stop. And I'm not just talking about engineers. I'm talking about people at all levels. We want competent people coming into our country. And HB1, I know the program very well. I use the program. Maitre d's, wine, experts, even waiters, high quality waiters. You got to get the best people. Now, then you go into people like Larry, and he needs engineers, and Massa needs, and this gentleman needs engineers like nobody's ever needed engineers, right? So we have to have the quality people coming in. Now, by doing that, we're expanding businesses, and that takes care of everybody. So I'm sort of on both sides of the argument, but what I really do feel is that we have to let really competent people, great people come into our country, and we do that through the H-1 program.
This
debate with
This statement from Trump largely goes against what his base has been saying since the debate in December. With Trump saying maitre d's, wine experts, and even waiters, he's saying quite literally entry-level, low-skilled positions. Now, I get it if you're a properly trained maitre d'. He's saying classically trained professional waiters at high-end restaurants, perhaps. But these are still jobs that Americans can train for and do. I'm curious what you guys think.
I know that Elon Musk got in, I believe. You could fact check me. He got in on an H-1B, I believe, and that's why he's so passionate about it. He was denied the O-1, which is for the exceptionally gifted people, the visa for the exceptionally gifted people. So I think that's why he fights so hard for the H-1B, is because it gave him this amazing opportunity for America. H-1B, it should be reformed to the point where it's more of an O1, where it's more of people who would add to society, who are merit-based, as opposed to coming in to be a waiter.
For those that don't know, O1 is exceptional talent. So your celebrities, your rock stars, whatever, pros, PhDs, that's the brain drain. H1B is, we can't find anybody. Can we get someone to run our bar who comes from, insert whatever country? A lot of the tech companies abuse this. I'm curious, Rep. Massie, your thoughts as, you're in Congress.
I have a foreign accent on my voicemail and my maps that narrates for me in my Siri. When people call up, they say, "Why do you have that?" I said, "It's an H-1B voicemail." There are just some jobs Americans won't do. They won't record my voicemail for me. But anyways, I think it's like a lot of things. It's well intended and it gets abused. When I was in business, I had a software company. This was 25 years ago. We had one person who was there on a visa at my company. I didn't really, HR hired him or whatever. I remember probably signing something to help him get his visa renewed, but he wasn't taking anybody's job. He had a certain competency and computer-aided design that was hard to come by. As an engineer, this is my background, engineering. I don't feel threatened. You're going to have centers of excellence in Canada, for instance, where people come in and build great things there. But I'm absolutely certain it's abused at this point. So the answer, and by the way, just one other thing, I think what the mandate in this election was to stop illegal immigration. I don't think there was a mandate on H-1B.
Okay, what I was about to say, okay, and I'm deadly serious now, okay? Deadly serious. Would you hire me? Tim, would you hire me, or anyone else who's watching us? Would you hire me to any kind of? Yeah, exactly. If there would be a job you think after this an hour or so that I could do, would you hire me? If you would think that, wow, this guy is good in talking and presenting, I don't know, selling, relations, whatever it is, would you? You would be, because I'm Polish.
Yeah,
right.
You would be an O1. You are unique.
I'm Polish. I'm a foreigner, right? Mm-hmm. I know. I can bet there is many people who would be ready right now to hire me. I'm happy to cooperate with everyone. When I was in London, I had this conversation with English lady, and she went, "If your plumbers and builders would leave England now, our economy would collapse." This is what she says. So the whole thing is, it's about getting migration programmed in a way that you don't have illegal migration. what he's trying to, I'm not defending the whole idea, but there is a huge difference between Dominik being in London for 5 years, paying his taxes, and then coming back to his homeland, working and serving to his people. And I do understand that he meant people who will come for 6 or 10 months, just like I did. I used to work on the cruise ships as a student. I've done my contract and I went back home. So this is, I think this is what we are talking about, not about taking jobs. And I think that we are talking about the situation when your unemployment is close to zero, right? We're not talking about a situation when you have like 7, 8, or 9% of unemployment in US and getting people. No. When your unemployment is close to zero, just like in Poland, it's 2% thanks to our government.
Wow.
2%, the lowest in European Union. Then you can think about quality migration for some time, 6 or 10 months.
I heard you say a statistic that 95% of the people who were immigrating into, what was that, Great Britain?
Yes.
Didn't pay taxes. I would assume every one of these H-1B visa holders is paying taxes. So the argument, that's a good argument you made, but I don't think it applies to H-1B.
But a waiter?
Yeah,
I
but
mean, there are young people out here who can train to do that job, that need jobs, that feel that they're being left behind.
Well, I've been in restaurants where the waiter is making probably close to 6 figures and supporting a family, and he's been in that restaurant for 20 years. I'm usually not the one paying for the meal. I don't choose these places, but go to Joe's Seafood down here in Washington, D.C. There's there's several guys who've supported a family and put them through college. That's a different category. I think that's what Trump has been to restaurants like that, and we have.
I understand.
Yeah,
I've been to these steakhouses, and you have waiters who are professionals. They can tell you about every wine from every region and the difference. But a 20-year-old American man or woman can train for that.
Of course.
And I think the challenge right now for Gen Z especially is they feel like they're struggling. It's hard to own property. They're seeing illegal immigrants. I know no one here is in favor of that, but they're seeing benefits given to illegal immigrants. And then on top of this, an argument being made, even by Trump, that if you want to be a waiter, something that you can go and get trained for over a period of a few months, we would rather bring someone in from a different country than give you those skills. But Connor, you wanted to jump in.
I was going to say a couple of things. First of all, I mean, Dominik, you're an absolute gentleman, as is my good friend Ayaan Hirsi Ali from Somalia, but we don't set our broad immigration policies for exceptions like yourself or Ayaan Hirsi Ali. There's a great example of the Polish plumbers and builders stuff. They were great compared to the cohort we've got now, but we still had to house them. So all the houses they were building, they also required the infrastructure. So
I do agree.
Yeah, so that's a comment about the volume. Yeah. But there's a comment about cultural proximity.
Yeah, I'm about to. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say an economy is just the aggregated activity of a people in a place and a time. So their culture feeds into what that activity is most likely to be like. And so if you mass import people from countries which are not very economically active, you can judge by proxy their culture is not very good. It's probably not very proximate to the United States. And so even if they're coming in and paying large volumes of taxes, it still feels like a transitory population charge. You don't know your neighbors, and so it doesn't matter how skilled these waiters are. If you put in 100,000 Indian waiters, that's still 100,000 people you don't know.
As Ian begins to get up
different ways.
Do y'all know the origin of the word economy?
Go for it.
Oikonomia.
Oh, oikos, yes.
Household management.
You know, I was thinking before I go, last thought is that, like, I don't know, man. I got mixed feelings on this immigration because in one way, if someone's born in the U.S., this is kind of like the idea of stripping away birthright citizenship. Phil Abonte's about to jump in. If someone's just a scummy, not useless, a horrible thing to say, but just like they eat really horrible, they're lazy, why would we prioritize that guy just because of where he was born over the really talented, brilliant Polish dude? It doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like, sorry, buddy, if you didn't try, you don't get it because you were from here. So I mean, that's kind of my mixed feelings on this.
But does that make him,
people.
does his laziness make him less of an American if he can trace his founding back to the Mayflower?
Technically, no. Technically, if you're born in the country, this might change. Technically, if you're born in the country, you get all the... Yeah, I think... Merit. Bye, everyone. Have a great night. Guys?
But the whole discussion, as I said, I think the whole discussion should start when your unemployment is close to zero. If there is an unemployment in your country, this discussion should not even appear. You have to take care of your own people If they need training, provide your training. If there is no money on the training, make money as a government responsible for the money on the training. Train your people, get them jobs, and then think about growing. All we know that bigger country, bigger society is more taxes, more opportunities. Look at China. Look at China. The way they're dealing. Look. Why? Because of the volume. We all know that. But as I said, if there is no unemployment, then you can discuss it. If there is even a small, slight anyone without a job, this discussion should not take place. That's it.
Can I ask a question? What's the magnitude in the United States of
I don't know
this?
if you can get around me.
How many H-1Bs do we give every year? I genuinely don't know the answer.
Because what, 85?
How much?
85,000?
85,000. I appreciate Connor's argument that you can't dilute your culture if you can't bring on too many people too quickly, or you lose what you are, your national identity. And I'm not saying they have to be the same color or anything like that. No. I'm just like, do they appreciate the Constitution and the principles that we stand for? But if it's 85,000, that might not be too many.
Let's Phil's joining us, and then I'm going to jump to a story.
Yeah, I think that the ideology of the people that are coming is really the most important thing. Like you said, if they believe in the things that make America the country we are, if they believe in, a capitalist system, if they believe in property rights, if they believe in individual rights, that the government should be subordinate to the people, then I'm fine with it. It doesn't matter where they come from. But if they have an ideology that is directly opposed to those things, I think the U.S. should completely say, no, you're not welcome here because you don't align with our ideals. And it has nothing to do with
it. You have to respect our faith, our culture, and our tax system. That's very basic.
Let's jump to this story from the New York Times. 22 states sue to stop Trump's birthright citizenship order. The lawsuit to block the president's executive order is the first salvo in what is likely to be a long-running legal fight over immigration policy. So I'll try to simplify this as much as I can. Under the 14th Amendment, it says all those born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction therein are citizens. Donald Trump has issued an executive order basically stating that if you are born of people who are here unlawfully or here only temporarily, we will not recognize your citizenship. 22 states have sued him over this. It likely will, I believe it'll go to the Supreme Court. I don't know if
That's the goal.
Right. And then the question is, how does the Supreme Court rule? I will give you my thoughts first, real quick. My interpretation of the 14th Amendment, and Josie would probably know better, so I looked to you after this, was literally following the Civil War, they were trying to rectify what had happened. And so they said, what of the slaves? Well, obviously, anyone who's born here and subject to our jurisdiction is a citizen, right? Okay. Which meant from here and back, those people are citizens. I do not believe they intended for it to mean anyone at any point ever who comes here and as a kid, that kid would be a citizen. And that is the interpretation that I believe Trump is taking. I'm curious your thoughts, Josie, as the scholar of the Constitution.
So the 14th Amendment, it was written by John Brigham, I believe, from Ohio. And his interpretation of subject to the jurisdiction thereof means the complete jurisdiction, not a partial jurisdiction. And a partial jurisdiction would be people who are here temporarily, whether lawfully or unlawfully.
But was it descriptive or prescriptive? Was he saying from this point forward, all people who are born in this country shall be citizens? Or was he saying all of those that are here, referring to the slaves who were born here and are subject to our jurisdiction, are citizens? Was it both?
I would imagine it was both if it's in the Constitution.
I think, again, I'll throw it to you, Massie. My interpretation was they were saying, hey, look, the Civil War happened. We don't want insurrectionists in the Senate or in Congress. The president, is officers of the government. We want to make sure that the people who are enslaved are citizens. I don't know that I look at that in the history and see that as them saying from this point forward, all people here and after. I'm curious.
Before I answer that question, I have a question for Connor and Dominik. Do you grant in Poland? Do you get birthright citizenship, and do you get it in Great Britain?
It's not the same as it is in America. When you're born, yes, but it's much harder to get citizenship than it is in America, I would say. You would think differently, but it's not easy.
So what about Great Britain?
You used to, I think it's until 1984. Weirdly enough, the woman currently leading the Conservative Party was an anchor baby. Her mother flew over from Nigeria, had her on the NHS, brought her back, and then she emigrated back at 16. Yeah, so she's as British as you and me. It is basically whether or not you get birthright citizenship doesn't really matter, just because the Home Office is rubber stamping visas and citizenship like it's going out of fashion.
So I just
That's
wondered,
right.
but now I'll answer your question. It was obviously about slavery. They weren't trying to create birthright citizenship when they did that amendment to the Constitution. And I asked Grok. It was just in a judiciary meeting with Jim Jordan and all the people on the Judiciary Committee an hour before I came over here, and we were talking about this question. And so while we're sitting there, I pull up my phone and I ask Grok, when they passed this amendment, did they intend to grant birthright citizenship? And Grok's like, no, this was all about slavery. But it has it's evolved into that, is what it's evolved to. But that was not the intent. And I think this is going to go to the Supreme Court. It's going to be one of those 5-4 or 6-3 decisions.
Yeah.
And you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah. So I'd never even considered the thought that it couldn't be something that was forward motion, but I have actually in my head for a different part of the 14th Amendment. I think it was the
Section 3.
Section 3, exactly, because that creates a constitutional crisis. That's saying you can't you can't be an insurrectionist. Our country was built on insurrection. Our country was built. That's why we're here. So the president, Jefferson Davis, so the president of the Confederacy, he was not pardoned, but they just let everything go about him. They're like, we're not going to push forward with any of this because this is going to be a constitutional crisis. And same thing. So they forgave all the Confederates, and I think that's the way to.
Well, there's a lot of complicated history.
No judge worth their weight wanted to take these cases because they go against the integrity of the United States.
I mean, even though all of the context and history does matter, like even all the arguments that are being made here, none of them, take into account the fact that you can now travel so much faster than you could at obviously any other point in history. And so, a woman can easily get on a plane or travel by car in 2 days to go from, almost anywhere in South America, drive into the United States and have a baby very easily. So these kind of the fact that now modern travel is so much faster,
and they actually do.
It makes anchor babies a considerable problem that actually has to be readdressed because of the fact that we live in a different time.
Careful, Phil. That's the argument they use against AR-15s.
Maybe we need to help our liberal friends understand why this interpretation exists and why Trump is moving in this direction. Maybe we need to create a sci-fi film where Hitler's parents visit America as tourists, give birth to baby Hitler, then travel back to Austria, Germany, or whatever. I don't know. And then, as the war is coming to its conclusion, he escapes to America, where he's an American citizen and runs for president and becomes president. Yeah. You'd say that's an absurdity. Why would we allow such an evil adversary of this country to be president? Well, he was born here. That makes him a citizen. So as long as he lives here for, I think, 10 years after the fact or something to that effect, then he can be, right?
I didn't see.
That makes no sense.
There's someone in the chat that has made a comment. I didn't catch their name, but it caught my eye as it passed by. But it's not lawful for children to profit from parental crimes. Mm-hmm. So if a parent comes into the United States and violates the law by coming into the United States, how it should be unlawful for them to profit by gaining citizenship by the crime committed by the parent.
Let me also add some other historical context that I may get in trouble for. I'm not advocating for this, okay, disclaimer, but you had to own property to vote at that time.
And that makes sense.
It was less of an argument about were you a citizen or not. It was like, are you part of this fabric of this region? Do you own property? Do you have a stake in what's going on here?
So
I'm not in
how about this,
I could advocate
Massie,
how did you contribute it?
How about I'm going to ask you this, and I'm actually curious how it works in Poland. I talked with Vivek Ramaswamy a couple of years ago, and we were trying to figure out how you bring responsibility to the vote. That you must have some civic responsibility. And one of the ideas that we floated, I don't think Vivek is for this idea now, but he floated the idea: you must sign up for selective service to get your voter card. men and women. It doesn't mean you'll be drafted. And we haven't used the draft in 50, 60 years. It means that you are willing to be in order to vote. I'm in favor of something like that. I'm curious what you think.
One of my favorite science fiction authors, Robert Heinlein, proposed that.
Yeah.
That you had to have that kind of stake in it. But he also had
Service
another
guarantee citizenship.
Yeah. He had another proposal, which was if you could solve a quadratic equation inside of the voting booth, your vote mattered. And then he said, we'll put a twist on this. If you fail to solve the equation after entering the voting booth, you never leave the voting booth. You disappear. If you
the floor opens up and you go into the...
And he said under this scenario, you would have informed, educated 12-year-old girls who could vote, and then you would have adults, their parents, who couldn't.
Right, but solving a quadratic equation doesn't confer understanding of global affairs, you know. But I'm curious, in Poland, how does it work?
Well, we never had this kind of problems because we are 40 million people now. Most of us had to flee our country during the communism. And you have to remember that when we gained back our independence in 1918, we had the communists after World War II for 70 years occupying our country. So many people had to leave Poland, fled to US, seeking for help because communists basically killed a lot of Polish people. So in 1989, we had partially free elections. And I would say that the real major democracy would start about, I would say, 2005, because like 2001, post-communist won, using obviously their money from Russia and using their influence. So in 2005, that was the first government after communism in Poland, conservative government. So, you know, we never experienced this time because Poland was occupied. And that is the difference between you and us.
It's pretty crazy. The area I grew up in Chicago, largely Polish migrants.
Because of the communists.
Exactly.
Most of them coming from the country, from the families where one or two members, like grandparents, fought against Germany or against Russia or against communism during the communism. They had to flee, they had to save their lives. And that is a real, because there is a difference between migrant and asylum seeker. They were coming here to find asylum, to save their lives because of the political system. In
Ukraine, they had what's called, as I was described to me, wafer cake.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you guys had in Poland?
Yeah.
So what it was is there's no food, and so they would get these thin wafers.
That's right.
And they would condense milk and pour it between each wafer because that was the best they could do for some kind of dessert.
And the cheapest, yeah.
And the cheapest.
And you have to remember that during the communism, I remember communism as a kid. I remember queues to buy shoes, to buy sugar, to buy meat.
How long?
Well, I spent the whole night to buy shoes. I didn't get them. So that's
People do that here for the new iPhone.
That's So it's funny now. It wasn't funny for me when I was a kid.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is the reason why I fight communists around the world in a way I can. This is why I hate communists. That's why I will never ever stop fighting communism, because I know what communism is. I experienced it. My father, my grandfather, who fought against communists, as I told you, for all of us, war ended in 1945. My grandpa said, no, communists, Russians took over Poland and they're occupying Poland. This is war. He fled to the forest and he fought against communists until 1947. Then my father was the one who started Solidarity in my town. Then Then I started studying law to become a prosecutor because I was dreaming to put all the communists to the jail. I found out many of prosecutors are communists themselves. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to be above them in some way. So I'm going to be a politician. And that's my war. That's my personal war because of my family's experience. That's why I think Kamala was a communist. All of them are communists, not the Democrats, because what they did was pure communism. That's why, thank God, President Trump won.
Real quick, do you want to give a shout out to Sid Meier's Civilization 2? Did you ever play that one? I recommend this for all of your kids to play, even as game as old as Civilization 2, because that's how I learned about the Polish Solidarity movement. Was in the game you're building a civilization, And if
Right,
you
yeah.
are bad to your people, you will get unrest in your cities. And the image they used to represent unrest was protesters from the Solidarity Movement.
That's
But
right.
Connor, you had something.
Yeah, sorry, Josie. I just a quick comment on the antiquated laws, and then I want to throw a grenade on the table. On the antiquated laws, in the UK, as a perfect example of this, we're a member of the European Court of Human Rights. It's distinct from the European Union. The European Convention on Human Rights was instituted in 1952 by Winston Churchill, and part of that is the ability to seek asylum in European countries. They had Dutch Jews in mind that had been turned away when they fled Nazi Germany. They didn't have a million North Africans and sub-Saharan African men who were doing machete attacks and attacking women in the street. Unfortunately, that law now applies to that. So much like Phil said, just the means of transportation, it's also a completely different people, ethic, ideology, etc. However, I don't like the talk of civics tests, of the idea that you have to solve a quadratic equation in a booth, the idea that a level of intelligence or the ability to rattle off all the articles of the Constitution should qualify you for a vote, because that idea premises, it doesn't answer the question of what is an American, right? If you just render American as a love of the Constitution and the rule of law and the ability to pay your taxes, the entire world becomes Americans in waiting. And so the question of legal or illegal status is shoved to the wayside, really. It doesn't solve the question of belonging. It doesn't treat the nation like a family whose constituents cannot just be replaced, chopped, and changed. And so the idea that we should have a civics test applied, I don't know what Vivek has in mind, perhaps rewatching Family Matters and rooting for Urkel or something, judging by his tweets about American culture. I don't like this sort of talk, because it renders culture completely flat. And so I'm very averse to this idea that we should thin it out to such an extent.
I think tests are dangerous too. And Bastiat said the best way to deal with this is just not to have shit for sale at the election. Like, if people are concerned about how large the voting franchise is, he says they wouldn't be fighting to get into the voting franchise if their future and their livelihoods didn't depend on it. And it shouldn't ever be that their livelihoods depend on that. The government should be much smaller than that, so that whether you're part of the voting franchise or not matters less.
There are wonderful people in rural Appalachia that are not that intelligent, but very virtuous, very hardworking, and they should not have to be clued up on all the minutiae of politics just to get by.
I believe in skin in the game when it comes to voting, and this was actually my first cancel attempt ever on X, was because I said the 19th Amendment was a mistake, and it got people talking. So essentially,
Why was it a mistake?
Because going back to what Congressman Massie said about how you used to be able to own property to vote, voting was left to the states, and that's why it's not written into our Constitution, saying this is how voting's going to work, aside from the electoral count.
Quick pause. Just for people who don't know, the 19th Amendment is women's right to vote. Sorry, continue.
It sure is. So, essentially, the states were given the power to run their states and vote in their states as they saw fit for their states. So even before the Civil War, there were territories, Wyoming and Colorado, that were having women and freed slaves vote in their elections already, because they're like, well, this fits us. So this is how we're going to do it in our state. And, for the same reason that we don't have a direct democracy where all the states vote and we get this, oh my God, I forgot the word.
National popular.
Thank you. National popular vote. It's the same reason we don't have that, because what's good for California isn't good for Wyoming, for instance. So doing it this way with the states, it might not be great for people who don't own property to vote in a certain state. It might not be great for women or men to vote in a certain state. And so it'd be up to their state legislatures to decide what that is, up to the voters to decide what that is. What is the best way to vote in our state? And I believe that's the way it was written into our Constitution. However, once there is now some federal legislation when it comes to who gets to vote in the elections, and there's 4 amendments. There's 15, 19, 24, and 26, and they all say it is the right of the citizens to vote this way. So that also answers the who gets to vote in the elections. It was always intended for citizens to be voters in the elections.
Although I just need to insert this fact that the apportionment of congressional seats and also electoral college votes counts illegal aliens in in the
Yeah.
apportionment.
Yep.
So California has 4 or 5 extra electoral votes in the presidential race by virtue of harboring millions of illegal immigrants.
Is this something that can be undone on a
They do
state
it on
level?
purpose. We know that.
Can Trump executive order this?
So Wilbur Ross, who conducts the census, he was the Secretary of Commerce when Trump was president before. He tried just to introduce the question of whether you're a citizen or not on the census. And there was so much blowback, and I think they gave up the fight. Hopefully Trump will bring this fight again and at least ask the question. And then
I think Trump should.
Governor DeSantis is trying to do this right now in Florida, but the legislature is refusing to cooperate with him.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, because it's politically risky. There's going to be.
It is.
There's going to be Republicans.
They're
who
gonna
are
lose.
like,
It's the rhinos that are leading the charge, and because they're worried they're going to lose votes and they're not going to be able to.
That was
run
the whole
him.
idea, to get them
In whatever-
not to have IDs.
in whatever way Trump can, he should be issuing executive orders on this. It is limited because it's there's a constitutional question, and then it's a legislative question. But I'm sure there's some policy Trump can take that can at least smooth out the edges a little bit or something.
The last census, I have heard stories of there being significant irregularities in it, and that being a massive problem. And also that speaks to the importance of the census coming up in 2030. First of all, and second of all, there was a policy by the Health and Human Services by HHS to transport essentially illegal migrants, people that came here and said that they were looking for asylum, but it was anyone that could get here. It was called the Refugee Resettlement Program. Hopefully, the Trump administration will end that. But what they were doing is that was the program in which they were actually taking people that came and claimed asylum and moving them specifically to places that were purple states,
but
in order to get them in order to get more votes for Democrats. So,
But you know who the refugee is by the international law. The refugee is a person who flees from the first from the country on conflict to the first safe country. You're not traveling around the world. So when I'm asked about the refugee, how many refugees Poland have taken, Katie Newman, I said 0. She was out. I was outraged. How can you say that? I'm proud of that.
When next time I go visit Spain or France or Germany, just maybe to take in the culture, if people ask me what I'm doing there, I'll just say I'm a refugee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can.
And that's it.
then
You're not.
I'll be paying for your
Refugee
bloody
on-
hotel
on
bill,
holiday.
Tim.
No.
What's interesting, I have heard the Trump administration may amend the 1951 Refugee Convention, because the phrase in there, it's very similar to AOC's Green New Deal, is a refugee is anyone unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin. So if you just don't feel like it at the end of your holiday,
I'm unwilling to pay taxes.
But the
I'm a
point-
tax
the
refugee.
point of me bringing this up is this is something that was funded by the government to basically water down the votes of conservatives, and partially to the goal was to establish a one party control over the whole country. And that was one of the things that Elon Musk took a lot of flack for pointing out, that people were coming to the country, they were being moved around the country by the government, by the Democrats, and they were using federal money to do it. So they're using tax money from Republicans to basically water down Republican votes.
this is why we actually have such a high volume of Indian migration in the UK. So Rishi Sunak, who now lives in your country, by the way, he's in California.
He moved there permanently?
He's going to move over permanently, yeah.
Wow.
So, he just cut and run. I suppose he called a election because he wanted to get his kids into a nice school by the next term early. He wrote a paper in 2014, something like The Changing Face of Britain, and he noted that Indians voted at a larger propensity than other ethnic minorities for conservative parties. And so he said, he did an interview with Qatari-funded media Al Jazeera, and he said, the politicians over there, pointing to the Houses of Parliament, might want to take note of that. And it just so happens when you had an Indian Home Secretary in Priti Patel and an Indian Prime Minister who cooed out the previous two, Rishi Sunak, we got 1 million Indians in 4 years. I wonder why that happened.
To me, it seems fairly logical. Trump ends birthright citizenship. We had Ro Khanna here the other day, who's a very reasonable man. I'm actually curious, before I go into this, what your thoughts are on Ro Khanna. You think we've found him very reasonable?
I appreciate that he's an ideologue and not a partisan. Now, a lot of people think those words are synonyms, but they're actually opposites that I've found. and I don't know if Dominik has this experience too, but before I got to Congress, I would hear these words used as pejorative. Oh, he's such an ideologue, or he's such a partisan.
Yeah.
What a partisan is they vote with their party every day. They don't even need to read the bills. They get the whip report on which way to vote that day. But it's hard for me to work across the aisle with a partisan by definition. But if you can find an ideologue on the other side of the aisle who happens to be a Democrat, occasionally your views agree. Like on the issues of foreign intervention, Ro Khanna and I would agree.
Now,
on stopping
when we were talking, he's in favor of illegal immigrants being given some form of amnesty or path to citizenship, as you would call it. And I think that exemplifies the issue with mass migration. I describe it with a simple analogy. You live in an apartment with a roommate. Every Friday, you pool your money and you vote for lunch. And it's 50-50 sometimes, so you got to compromise. But, you often order pizza and wings. One day you wake up and there's a guy sleeping on your couch. And you go, hey, who is this? And your roommate says, that's Jim. He got kicked out. He has nowhere to go. He was being abused, and please let him stay here. And you say, all right, fine, because I'm a nice guy.
Night or two.
And next thing that, it's Friday and it's time to vote for lunch, and he's not put any money in, but you say, I want pizza and wings again. And your roommate says, no, we're going to get chicken salad sandwich. And then Jim says, yeah, chicken salad sandwich. And you say, hey, wait, you haven't been paying into our food. And he says, yeah, but 2 against 1. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And then you don't get your lunch anymore. And you say, okay, I guess it's okay. I don't need to eat pizza, but one piece of what you are familiar with, what you wanted, has been taken away. But here's where it gets worse. Next day you wake up, there's another guy sleeping on the couch. And you say, whoa, I didn't agree to this. And then your roommate and Jim both vote. No, he can stay. 2 against 1. Now it's 3 against 1, then 4 against 1. With so I'm not saying this to make it sound like I'm against immigration. I like O1. I think getting brain drain, all these things are good, but it's got to be legal. It's got to be limited. We can't sacrifice the interests of the next generation for people who don't live in this country.
Simple.
But there's a mathematical equation here that's very simple and logical. There is a number by which if you bring in non-Americans into this country and give them residency, not even citizenship, their cultural values will outweigh the cultural values of those that have lived here. And it's not a race thing. As Tucker Carlson said, the interests of Black Americans are the exact same as the interests of Americans. The concern is people who are not American. So if I wake up and I have what I describe as Christmas morning, we have pumpkin pie, we have warm apple pie, we have baseball. Where I grew up in Chicago, we have Black people, we have Latinos, we had Asians who all loved Christmas and apple pie, and we grew up sharing in the same culture. But if you have at a very short moment a mass influx of people from all parts of the world, then you get cultural dilution. And at a certain point, the things you love and believe in, the traditions you care about, and your laws are diluted and weighed down by the interests of people who don't share them with you. So if we follow on the path of the Biden administration continuously, eventually the country will be not just unrecognizable, but ungovernable in a very bad way.
Well, it's the same when you're going to Saudi Arabia in your bikini.
Yeah,
right?
Good luck. You go to prison.
You see, and it's the same when you're going to India and then
Try and eat a burger.
for example,
Right.
like really,
Well, here's a
raw meat, and you want this really bloody burger, and
here's an example. Well, I'll throw on top. I went to Egypt, and the Hilton's breakfast, they had American continental breakfast. The bacon was actually beef. It was because you can't have pork.
Yeah.
But there was a story in the United States where an Indian man went to Taco Bell and he ordered a burrito and he said no beef. They gave him beef and he bit it and chewed it and swallowed and then realized he had eaten beef, which was sacrilege. And he sued and he won a good sum. This is an old story from a couple decades ago. That's interesting. How would this Taco Bell worker known that he was condemning a man to hell or whatever because he accidentally put the ground beef that they sell in his restaurant? And that just, I'm not saying anybody was right or wrong. I'm just saying the cultural differences lead to these kinds of conflicts.
So in Europe, because of the leftism, this situation went so far that in schools, kids are not allowed, Christian kids are not allowed to have sandwiches with the meat at all. If all beef, but if you want to have a nice piggy sandwich, you're not allowed because you might offend someone. I had this discussion with the lady. I'm at the airport very often in Brussels, and she was telling me about her kids. She can't. They can't have sandwiches with ham. They can't she cannot make a sandwich because someone might be offended. Can you believe that?
That's an absurdity.
That's reality in European Union. And this is what we do not want in Poland. We don't have it, and we're going to protect our culture. We're going to fight for it because I love my ham and I love my sausage.
Americans
That's it.
couldn't live without bacon.
Can I issue
That's
a correction
it.
on
This is the
myself
part of
I've
our
been
culture.
thinking about since I said it? Women in Wyoming actually got the right to vote slightly after the Civil War. But my point is that it wasn't 1919. They didn't have the states' right. I just wanted to issue that.
And I think the important thing about the 19th Amendment was that it the reason why it was a mistake. I'll pause so that the left and the feminists can take this clip. The 19th Amendment was a mistake. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, I'll clarify what I really mean by that. Actually, I have no problem with women voting. I'm not saying that women should not be able to vote. I'm saying that the reason people opposed the suffrage movement, including many women, was because voting came with civic responsibility, like the fire brigade. And the anti-suffragettes, that's what they were called, right?
Yes.
They were saying, I don't want to be compelled to serve in fire brigade. That's men's work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to vote. And ultimately, there was a compromise where they said, we'll pass the amendment. Women will receive no civic responsibility, but they will receive civic benefit. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. That's not me slighting women. That was actually the compromise made by the Congress and the states at the time, was that they were not going to impose civic responsibility on women, but they would grant them the right to vote. I believe right now there must be an answer to the draft question, as it is in absolute violation of, in my view, many our rights in general, but also the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The idea that only men are required to sign up for selective service, but women are entitled to all rights and privileges without the responsibilities. So right now, this would impose, I believe, an unjust requirement on men that is not on women. So you have one of two options. Something's wrong with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, or something's wrong with the 19th Amendment, but you got to pick one of them.
Real quick on that issue of commitment to public service. I was talking to my Amish raw milk supplier, and I bring him news.
As we do.
Yes.
I bring him news from the outside occasionally. And
I love this.
they do buy like soap and stuff from the outside world. And he was talking about inflation. And they said, well, a lot of that's caused by those stimulus checks, but I'm sure you don't know about those. You didn't get those. He's like, oh no, we got the checks. And I'm like, what'd you do with them? We burned them. and I said, why did you burn them? And he says, you take the check, before you know it, they send you to war.
Yeah.
Like,
That's right.
Because right now they have conscientious objector status, by default, if you're Amish. You don't
Amish are
enter
great.
the draft.
Yeah.
We have, up by us, we have a lot of Amish farms.
But he didn't
Yeah.
expect to take the money and then not be obligated to war later on.
Right.
Smart. I just wanted to weigh in on what you said, Tim. So you asked if there was either something wrong with the 1964 Civil Rights Act or the draft as it was. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was absolutely correct, as it said that communists are not people. And this is true.
Okay.
So it can't possibly be that.
So we need to issue a fact check clarification. She's not joking. It actually says that. It says that it's something to the effect of, this law shall not be construed to provide protections for communist groups or organizations that are communist. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. That's codified.
Mm-hmm.
That means that you could assert an ideology and strip yourself of rights in this country.
Yeah, and that's been upheld. That's been upheld in New York against teachers. Yeah, there's a case that it's been upheld, and somebody can fact check me on this in the chat.
So in all seriousness, I do think. Let me say this first. Democrats are in favor of women being drafted. They, whenever the question has arisen, it's largely been Democrats who have said, we want this. And for equality reasons, Republicans on moral traditionalist reasons say women should not be in combat or in the military.
No, women should definitely not be drafted. This is, once you are sending women to fight your wars, you don't have a country. Once you are
draft doesn't mean combat.
It doesn't mean combat. But once you're sending women into these positions, forcing women into these positions, the people who carry the babies and carry on the next line of the future, you don't really have a country. What are you fighting for?
How-
You're not really fighting for the future of your country when you're sending everybody that makes the babies into war to defend the soil.
Well, we have a problem right now in this country that has been quite acrimonious in that women are not required to provide equal responsibility, and it's a fact. Women don't have to sign up for selective service. This is unconstitutional. This is a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So something must be remedied here.
I think they should just get rid of it altogether. I don't think men or women should be conscripted or forced to serve in a war that they don't want to fight in.
I disagree on that.
What's your opinion?
Conscription, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe the founding fathers were intending to be like, we are going to force young men to get on boats, go halfway around the world, and go fight for some resource in some faraway land no one's heard of. I think the intention of conscription, part of the reason why they removed, there was a portion, and you probably know this, the portion of the original Second Amendment, which I think was like Article 5 or something, stated that
Article 4.
Was it 4? Conscription was not I forgot the exact wording, but there was a phrase that you did not need to serve in the military to have a right to bear arms. And they were concerned that by leaving that in, it could be construed as you don't have to be conscripted. And so they said, let's just simplify it. Conscription at the time was, if we get invaded and our homeland is being burned down and our lives are destroyed, we are going to bring young men to come and fight with us. What it's turned into is, we have a peacekeeping operation in Vietnam where we faked an attack on one of our vessels to generate public support for, and now you are hereby forced against your will to go fight it. So there's a difference in what it means to be drafted in what the corrupt issue was versus what it really is. My view is, if any adversary of these United States started storming the beaches of the United States, I got to be honest, if the Democrats were in power, as we saw with the establishment, I'd tell them to screw off, and I'd look to my family. But in a pure sense, assuming there's no corruption in government, if someone attacks our country, I would respond with, what can I do? Tell me where to stand. I will help.
It's hard because young men who are, primarily military-age men in our country, they don't love our country. And I mean, I honestly don't blame them the way that they're treated. And
I blame TikTok.
Yeah, it's TikTok. So the way that they're treated, men are demoralized. They're not taken for jobs that they are qualified for. They're not as educated, as the left would say, as others, because they might go into a trade or something. They're just very demoralized, and so they're like, what is the point? We don't love our country. I'm never going to get married. I don't know if I want kids. Like they're ruined by porn. They're ruined by TikTok. They're ruined by all of these all this shit coming in. So why on earth would they want to die for this country, a country that does this to them?
So, So we have this tweet. End Wokeness tweeted, the State Department issues a one flag policy. American flags can be flown, nothing else. I don't know if that's confirmed or not. The Department of State just said today the Deputy Secretary of State Sherman and senior officials raised the Progress Pride.
This is 2021.
Raised the Progress. Yeah. Oh, this is old. Yeah.
Okay,
This is old.
it's old.
So this video is old. I wonder if there's another source to this, but outside of that, we're going to go to Super Chats. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, share the show with everyone you know, and become a member by going to timcast.com. I implore you, my friends. First of all, you support all of the work we do. Members are what make this happen. You'll notice we don't do a lot of ad reads like every other podcast. We're planning on implementing maybe at the beginning of the show, as we do sometimes, and around the 9:30 mark Eastern time, maybe a couple of ads because, well, we got to pay the bills. But we've largely held off on this because you as members are a better means, in my opinion, of making a good, legitimate show for everybody with less interruptions. But I will say this. We're not going to have the members-only show as we normally do tonight because of we're currently in D.C. in a special space. But we do have an amazing, uncensored green room episode with our friend Dominik over here, member of European Parliament.
Thank you for having me.
It was incredible. The story you told about Russia and the Soviet Union and communism and the conversation was really fantastic.
Why I hate them. I must say that by their actions, you have to pay the consequences. They have to convert.
So
Russia has to convert.
So it is uncensored. I'll put it that way. And I recommend you check that out because you will also be supporting the show. But we'll read your Super Chats now. So we have Schlip who asks, Rep Massie, when can we repeal the Hughes Amendment?
Yes.
Can you explain what it is?
I think he's talking about the 1985 amendment to the bill that ostensibly was supposed to be a good bill to allow interstate transport of
Sportsman
firearms.
Protections Act.
Yeah. And at the last second, by voice vote, like I wished I had been here. I would have been that dude. Like I object, but at the last second, they added this amendment that said there'll be no more fully automatic firearms that can come into civilian possession.
That is terrible.
It is terrible. I would, and by the way, these guns are not used in crimes. Haven't been used in crimes. I may have a few of them. May have had them before the boating accident. Who knows? It should be repealed. I mean, what's not clear about the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed.
And it's been infringed every step of the way.
The NFA is an infringement. The Sportsman Protection Act, the Hughes Amendment to the Sportsman Protection Act is an infringement. The 1930 there was a 1934 I forget the name of the bill.
National Firearms Act.
Yeah, the National Firearms Act. That I mean, all of these are infringements. The existence of the ATF is an infringement. I mean, we have an FBI, right? So the FBI can handle what the ATF does. We don't need an ATF. There's a bill that's floating around Congress. I'm sure you're familiar with it, to abolish the ATF, and I would love to see more congressmen get on board with that and get that to Donald Trump's desk.
Jacob Hawley says, let's go, populist, Republican, libertarian coalition. God, I'm so invigorated. We keep winning. It feels so good. I'm crying. Wow. Mr. Tarczynski, you must be prime minister or president of Poland.
One day.
One day. Yeah.
I love it.
My plan is to run in 10 years. In America, it's a different way of talking about it.
Yeah, nobody wants to admit it.
No,
Right.
I already admit it. I want to run in 10 years for president. So
We have a bunch of laws here to where as soon as you announce candidacy, there's like a bunch of restrictions.
Yep.
So everyone just says we're exploring, or
no,
something like
I
that.
can say what my dreams are. Come on, you're not going to restrict my dreams.
Yeah,
I want to
fair
be
enough.
a president. I'm going to do whatever I can to become one day. That's it. I want to do it in 10 years. So
Right on. All right. Free Men Die Free says the federal judge / prosecutor in Ross's case openly stated they wanted to make an example out of him because he is a libertarian and his sentence was how they did so. Wow.
It's terrifying.
Yep.
Well, they've done the same thing after the riots in London. It's funny, there are currently people in prison for Facebook and X posts about the perpetrator of the Southport massacre, the murderer Axel Rudipakana, not a Welshman, turns out, second-generation Rwandan migrant, possibly an Islamic convert if, possession of Al-Qaeda manual and praying at a mosque in prison are to be believed. There are people that said a Muslim did this during the summer riots, and I believe his name's Wayne O'Rourke, is currently in prison, I think, for 3 years for a Facebook post. That's actually more time than some of the perpetrators of the rape gangs who are currently out of prison.
What happened to the UK?
Tony Blair?
that's what happened.
That's the short answer.
Oh, geez. All right. Gregors, I cannot pronounce your name. I'm sorry. He says, gotta say 9, if not 10 out of 10. Dominik's last name pronunciation, Tim. Impressive.
Ooh.
Are you ready to try mine? Yeah, I definitely can.
Dominik is good enough. Dominik.
If I always try to get the pronunciations correct. So before the show, I said Tarczynski.
Very good pronunciation. It's not easy to find me on social media because of my surname, but it would be very
it's
nice
Chuck.
if you'll find me on Twitter and Instagram, Dominik Tarczynski.
Tarczynski.
Yeah, Tarczzy.
Yeah. So Gregor's last name is BRZECZYSCZYKIEWICZ.
Bless you.
Bless you. I love Polish language. It's not easy.
Yeah, growing up where I did, I had a lot of friends who were Polish, and so their names, SZCZs. And
That's right. Yes.
a lot of that stuff. And it is fascinating that it wasn't until I had left that I actually learned why so many Polish people lived in my neighborhood. And it's kind of crazy that I didn't realize it until I was an adult. I was like, hey, wait a minute. My friends fled communism.
That's right.
They were little kids, and that was going on. Their parents
That's right.
had to flee.
And we had this fight for years. That's why I really want you to come to Poland with your cameras, and we would do a great journey on the streets and interview on the streets of Warsaw, Krakow, and other beautiful places. You will see the differences. Because what I say, Poland is the safest country in Europe, the lowest unemployment, the least number of rapes, the highest GDP after COVID. All this you have to see.
Was it hard to get out of the country during the Soviet era?
Very hard.
What would happen if you said, "Hey, we're gonna leave"? Like, how would you have to
They
do
would
it?
they would shoot you.
Wow.
Yeah, they would kill you.
Well,
Like
we know
like
what the Berlin Wall-
Berlin Wall,
Yeah.
right? You try to cross and you're killed. That's communists. That's what they do. They kill you. So if they cannot kill you, they kill your family.
Nobody was trying to flee from West Germany into East Germany.
That's that's the question I keep asking communists, leftists, and Democrats, so-called Democrats, and I keep asking many of those who hate Christians, if you hate Christian countries and Christians, why are you here?
And then what we see in the United States is that where I live, for instance, there are people who live, who work in the Washington, D.C. area, who then move to West Virginia, where the laws are better and you can defend yourself, but then they vote for policies that reflect where they're trying to stay away from. And so this is true largely for immigration as well. There's a viral video after Assad's government fell and he fled to Russia. There were people I believe it was in the UK, being asked, now that there's like some guy walking around, he goes like, now that Syria is free, will you go home? And they go, well,
My brother, the economy not so good now, my
yes,
brother.
you saw that video.
Yeah,
It's
of
not
course.
so good. It was about something else, right? Okay, let's grab some more super chats. Ted Thornton says, better that 10 guilty people go free than even one innocent person suffer. Yet they will continue to hold them regardless of their innocence. And the reason why Blackstone's formulation was so important that Benjamin Franklin increased it by an order of magnitude, saying 100 guilty persons escape, is that in a society where the implication is even if you are innocent, we will imprison you, there is no incentive to be innocent. There's only an incentive to be cutthroat and fight for yourself. And so I believe Otto von Bismarck famously said it is better that 10 innocent people suffer than one guilty person escape. The problem with that ideology is it eventually collapses as everyone begins just betraying everybody out of fear. The stories I've heard from the Soviet Union, a friend told me that there were two apartments. This was in Kiev. And the neighbors got into a fight over something mundane, but neighbors fight. So one of the neighbors called the police and said, I overheard, my neighbor saying communism was bad. The next day when they woke up, their apartment was completely empty and the person was never seen from again.
Of course. The food stamps is our reality. That was our reality. We had a food stamps. I remember it. If you wanted to buy a sugar, you could buy a pack of sugar once a month. Then they took your food stamp, and then you've got another stamp, and you buy pork, like, I don't know, half a kilo or whatever.
Was it
Tim, in the United States, we call that a homeowners association.
Well, but it wasn't funny to us. It wasn't funny at all. It was really hard. So if someone is trying to ask me about leftism, leftist ideology, any good social way of thinking and supporting those poor and equal rights in the way that everyone is equal and all this, I'm trying to tell them about my story, the story of Europe.
Yeah.
Behind the Iron Curtain. You would never understand how hard it is when you lose everything, even your dignity.
Michael Malice talks about this. He says people in this country genuinely do not understand how bad it could get. How bad possible, how possibly bad it could be.
Okay, so I'll tell you, and it's real. First of all, you are losing your nails. Then they are taking out your teeth, your eyes. They cut your ears. They waiting, and then they shoot you if you like. That's what they did.
When you speak ill of their regime, when you
that's what happened with the soldiers, like my grandfather after 1945, when Russians took over. This is what they did to hundreds of thousands of Polish people, right?
Well,
if we are talking about communists not being humans do not behave like this.
I think that's part of the reason Trump won this election. People saw what they were doing to him, political prosecution, weaponization of the court system.
That's right.
And they said, if they can do that
it's a modern form of communism.
we are next.
Tyranny.
It might be more mild here because of the culture here, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't get to exactly what we're talking about.
That's right. That is why always America first.
Yes,
Poland first.
the-
Great Britain first. We are responsible for our homes. This is our homeland, and we have to fight for it. Not getting crazy with all these ideologies coming from the left. Like they says this migration is an enrichment for our society. So I said to them, okay, take them all and pay for them.
Isn't it strange? How they
You're
don't
going to be
re-enrich
rich
their own
and
nations?
enrich.
Let's grab this one from Torn. He says, Rep. Thomas Massie is so based that, quote, Based was afraid to ask for his permission to represent him. Congress sure can use more people just like him.
Bravo.
I would take 2 more. If you could just send me a couple more.
Couldn't we get a few dozen? I mean, there's 435 of you guys.
Well, so are there any members of Congress that you would shout out as doing good work?
Ooh, in the battles that are coming up, I'm going to give Victoria Spartz a shout out. She grew up in Soviet Union, Ukraine, and she can see, what Dominik sees. She's like, you're not too far away from that.
That's
With
right.
the oligarchs, they're running the healthcare systems, for instance. She's like, this is like Ukraine.
You have to be very vigilant. You have to be very careful.
The minute the left started accusing the incoming administration of being oligarchs, I perked up and I'm like, okay, well, accuse your enemy of that which you are doing. I'm like, where are their oligarchs? Oh, it's everywhere. It's the healthcare. It's in the food. It's in the sugar. It's in big tech. It's everywhere.
There was to be a little bit cliche for all of you, I'm going to tell you a story, and it's an Occupy Wall Street one. But I think one of the best stories I have probably from Occupy was there were 2 young college-age socialists arguing with a police officer who was in his 50s, and he was telling them how his family fled communism. He was a child during communism, and how devastating it was, the torture, the murder, the kidnappings, the fear of waking up in the middle of the night, someone banging on your door. And these young people are arguing with this guy who literally in his life had fled communism. So this is 2011. And so it was not even that long ago. This guy was a young man when he had fled. And I think the most profound thing about this story was this man who was explaining how he fled communism and they were wrong was morbidly obese.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a major shift in coming to this country. And, with all due respect, I mean, he had more food than he could ever dream of. So, these young people, they don't want to listen. They don't quite understand. But it was really interesting to hear him tell that to these people. Another funny thing that happened was there was a table where socialists were giving out literature. And at Occupy, I asked them, I said, one of the issues that the occupiers were having was that they only have so much food to give out.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are people at the park who are doing things like cleaning up
Right.
and helping organize. And the problem is, once they're done cleaning, by the time they finish their work, they go to the kitchen and the food's gone. So how can we ensure that those who are actually contributing to the movement are receiving food, not as compensation, but because they need to eat to survive? And this woman said, maybe there's some kind of work certificate or piece of paper they could give out that represents the work you do. And I said, so like we could give pieces of paper that represent the labor, and so we can hand those in for things like food and clothing. Right. And I was like money. And she got particularly upset.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to, when I'm invited to do like podcasts or to give a talk or whatever, I'm trying to be everywhere around the world to tell people about the communism, how it really is, because I'm the living example of this fight in my family. And people think that communism is something in the books, in the history. It's not. It's still present around the world.
Yeah.
And you still have to fight it.
It's in my mentions every day.
That's right. I'm serious.
Let's grab this from the text vet. He says, I work for a Fortune 500 fintech as a strategic director. H-1B is not used for the best. They're hired specifically to undercut Americans, same as offshoring. It's offshoring, but bringing them here instead of having them remote.
There are lots of Indian companies that game the visa lottery and make people pay, and they get imported over to depress wages.
Ro Khanna, the other day, had me ready to stand up and clap for him when he said, leftists got, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, leftists got it wrong in this assumption that globalization was going to bring people of all races into this democratic system where we all hold hands and everyone prospers. And all it actually did was hollow out the working class and hurt, middle class and working class Americans. And I was like, wow, coming from a Democrat. And he said, this is my issue, that the American worker is being left behind by these policies that the left brought that were wrong.
Luke's in the chat and he said, yo, that's my dad.
Yep. Yeah, Luke is very excited. Luke Rutkowski, for everybody who doesn't know of We Are Change, was born in Poland, which it was called the Soviet satellite, I believe. It wasn't.
That's right. Never been officially part of Soviet Union, but
Occupied.
in fact, it was occupied, and all the decisions were made in Moscow. In Moscow, just those who betrayed Poland, they were the soldiers of Moscow. It's so important because they had children, grandchildren, and their grandchildren are in Polish politics now. I am the grandson of the underground army officer who fought against communists, sitting in the same parliament with the grandson of the communist officer who was taking out the thief and taking down the nails. I know this man, and I see him every day on the corridor.
People need to understand. I mean,
that is why every time when someone is inviting me to give a talk, I'm open to do it. Whenever someone is asking me to do the podcast, I'm trying to do it because I know that I'm not that old yet. I still remember the world without internet and cell phone, and I remember communism. This is so precious. This experience has to be given away.
Everybody, I suggest you head over to timcast.com and click join us, become a member to watch the uncensored Green Room episode we recorded before the show. And I will stress uncensored. You should definitely check it out. And you'll also get access to the Discord server, hang out with like-minded individuals. We will be here once again tomorrow, so we're not going to have the typical members-only shows as we do them live because they're time constraints. So smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Dominik, do you want to shout anything out?
No, just find me on Twitter and Instagram. Let's stay in contact. It's not easy to pronounce my surname, but you will find it. I'm very happy to give away my time and talk about, what we have in front of us, not only about history, but about the future as well. It's very important. Thank you very much, Tim, for having me. It's very important for me. It's very personal. It's not my job only. It's not my post that I am the member of the European Parliament. I do believe what I say. And I do believe that this is about future of our children and grandchildren.
Right, Massie.
Just real quick, there was a question about the Hughes Amendment. I do think there's a possibility of making progress on the Second Amendment in this Trump administration.
Yes, mm-hmm.
We could get rid of the tax and registration on suppressors, which are basically hearing protection.
Yep.
I'm about to introduce a national constitutional carry bill, which basically says it doesn't matter which state you live in, you still have the Second Amendment right to carry a firearm without asking the government's permission.
Go. Awesome.
So there are some bright things in the future, and people, if you look for my hashtag Sassy with Massie, you'll find some of my more acidic stuff.
It's not acidic. It's wonderful.
Connor.
Yeah, speaking of people who spew vitriol on Twitter, you can find me at con_Tomlinson on X. You can find the rest of my work at Courage Media, New Culture Forum, and lotuseaters.com.
And I'm Josie. I'm the redheaded libertarian. You can find me on X at TRHL Official. I just wanted to read this $100 super chat because I thought that was really nice. It said, shout out to Thomas Massie, Josie, Polish dude.
Polish dude. My name is Dominik Tarczynski.
Yes, and it goes, go America, America first. My civic duty isn't to die for any foreign nation. And that was sent by EG. Thank you, EG.
I am Phil That Remains on Twix. I'm Phil That Remains Official on Instagram. The band is All That Remains. New record drops January 31st. It's called Anti-Fragile. You can go check out 4 singles. Forever Cold, Let You Go, No Tomorrow, and Divine. They're available on YouTube, Amazon Music, Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, and Deezer. And don't forget, The Left Lane is for crime.
I was
going to scream across the room.
Thanks, Tim. Tim gave me his camera. I'm Ian Crossland. You follow me everywhere, but really follow all these guys, man. Great fucking show, dude.
Thank you.
Tomorrow is going to be amazing. We don't normally announce guests, but we got some good friends that are joining us. So the reason why we don't usually announce guests is because when someone's schedule changes, these things happen. We don't want to impugn their honor, but we expect Angela McArdle and Matt Walsh. So we're really excited that they'll be joining us here in DC. It's going to be a really great conversation considering we have this tremendous string of victories as Donald Trump is keeping his promises. So again, thank you all so much for hanging out. Go to timcast.com, watch those uncensored green rooms. We have one from yesterday as well, and we'll have another one tomorrow, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you very much.